moment the bank manager's finger hovered over the phone, a life changed. Not because of a crime, but because of a color, because of a suit, because of quiet confidence that didn't belong, in his mind, to the man who wore it. It was a thick Thursday in Arkansas. Heat pressed down on 4th Street, trapping the scents of grease and exhaust. Inside Jefferson State Bank, the air conditioning hummed a cold, sterile tune. Transactions whispered, pens scratched. An ordinary afternoon, until he entered. Malcolm Vance moved through the glass doors with a stillness that spoke of discipline. Late 30s. A charcoal suit that fit like a second skin. Hair trimmed close. He carried a worn leather attaché case, not flashy, but serious. He nodded to the security guard, a silent mutual acknowledgement of presence, then took his place in line. He observed the manager's corner office, the glossy-eyed receptionist scrolling on her phone, the cameras like black insects in the ceiling. He filed it all away, a habit from another life. When his turn came, the teller, a young woman named Leah, offered a bright, automatic smile. "How can I help you today?" "I'm here to complete a wire transfer," Malcolm said, his voice low and even. "I confirmed the details yesterday." "Great, I'll need your ID." He passed over 2 forms of identification, a passport, a second government-issued card with a seal that wasn't common. Leah's fingers brushed the laminated edges. Her smile didn't fade, but it froze. Her eyes flickered from the IDs to his face, then back. Something in her posture tightened, just a fraction. "One moment, sir," she said, her cheer now thinly stretched. She typed something, then beckoned a supervisor over with a glance. A hushed exchange followed, hands cupped near mouths. Malcolm stood, unmoving, a statue of patience. "Mr. Vance," Leah said, turning back with strained politeness, "would you mind waiting over in our seating area? My manager would like to speak with you, just routine for larger transfers." Malcolm's gaze held hers for a beat too long. "Routine," he repeated, not a question. He gave a slight, understanding nod and moved to the padded chairs. The energy in the room shifted. A current of silent attention began to flow. An older man pausing his deposit slip. A woman in the loan line subtly angling her phone. Malcolm sat, crossing his legs. He didn't look at them. He watched the manager's office. The manager, a man named Gerald Price, stood behind his glass wall. He wasn't on the phone, he wasn't reviewing papers. He was staring directly at Malcolm. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached over and closed the vertical blinds, slicing the room off from his view. Malcolm's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He checked his watch. Time stretched. 3 minutes, 4. Behind the closed blinds, Gerald Price finally picked up his desk phone. His knuckles were white around the receiver. He spoke in low, urgent tones, his eyes darting repeatedly to the opaque window where Malcolm's silhouette waited. Across the lobby, Leah the teller kept glancing from her screen to the seated man and back, her earlier nervousness now hardening into something closer to fear. She hadn't just followed protocol. She had set a wheel in motion. Malcolm didn't move. He had learned patience in dust-choked observation posts overseas, in places where a single breath could give you away. This was just another form of waiting, another form of being watched. The door to the manager's office opened. Gerald Price emerged. Wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, he attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Vance, could you step in here for a quick verification?" Malcolm rose. "Verification of what exactly?" "Oh, just some internal flags on the transfer amount. Standard procedure." Price's voice was too high, too quick. Malcolm followed him into the office. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a soundproof box. The manager offered water. Malcolm declined. He sat, his posture relaxed but alert, as Price sank into his executive chair, the leather sighing under his weight. "So," Price began, clearing his throat, "the transfer, it's for 1.2 million? "It is." "Right. That kind of sum, with the documentation you provided, it triggers reviews. Malcolm leaned forward just an inch, his eyes locked onto Price's. "You didn't call a review desk," he said, his voice a calm, low rumble. "You called the authorities." Price blinked rapidly. "Sir, I assure you—" "I know the difference." Malcolm cut him off, the words final. "I've been on the other end of that call." Silence swallowed the room. Gerald Price's facade crumbled at the edges. He looked at the man before him, truly looked, and for the first time a tremor of doubt, not about Malcolm, but about his own actions, flickered in his gut. Subscribe to LostBlack for stories that don't just entertain, they reveal. The silence in the glass-walled office was a physical thing. Gerald Price could hear his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. Malcolm Vance hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't threatened. He simply stated a fact. And that fact was a verdict. "It's not personal," Price finally stammered, the words sounding hollow even to him. "The IDs, they're just unusual for this kind of transaction. We have protocols." "Is my identification fraudulent?" Malcolm asked, each word precise. "No, it appears genuine. It's just the level of clearance." "You mean the level of clearance on a black man?" Malcolm stated. It wasn't a question. Price's face flushed a mottled red. "That is not what I said. It's what you saw." Malcolm leaned back, his gaze never wavering. "And now they're on their way." As if summoned, the first sirens cut through the afternoon haze outside, not screaming but present. Two unmarked black SUVs slid to a curb directly in front of the bank. Conversations in the lobby died mid-sentence. Heads turned. Phones were lifted not to film, yet, but to see. The doors opened in unison. Two men in dark suits emerged. They moved with a coordinated, purposeful grace that cleared space without a word. Earpieces coiled into their collars. Their eyes, hidden behind sunglasses, scanned the room in one sweeping, assessing glance. Leah at the teller window took an involuntary step back. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The taller agent held up a leather-clad badge, flashing it once before moving. They didn't speak to her. They didn't speak to anyone. Their path was a straight line to the manager's office. Gerald Price, watching through the slats of the blinds he'd just reopened, felt his blood run cold. This wasn't the local police. This was something else. His protocol had summoned ghosts from a federal ledger. Inside the office, Malcolm remained seated. The door opened. The first agent entered, removed his sunglasses, and his stern expression shifted. Not to anger, but to a sharp, professional recognition. He didn't speak to Price. He looked directly at Malcolm, who stood slowly, meeting his gaze. Then the agent did something that sent a shockwave through the silent bank. He saluted. A crisp, respectful military salute. The second agent, entering behind him, did the same. Both men held the position for a solemn beat before dropping their hands. "Sir," the first agent, Henderson, said, his voice carrying in the dead quiet, "we apologize for the interruption." Price's mouth hung open. A soundless gasp escaped the crowd in the lobby. A child pointed and was quickly hushed. What is this?" Price managed to sputter, stepping forward. "This man came in. He was trying to—" Agent Henderson turned, cutting him off. "This man is Lieutenant Colonel Malcolm Isaiah Vance, former Deputy Director of the National Intelligence Liaison Group." He let the title hang in the air, a weighty, tangible thing. "You called in a routine fraud alert on a decorated intelligence officer." The revelation hit the room like a shockwave. Leah's hand flew to her mouth. The security guard who had edged closer now looked rooted to the floor. The whispered assumptions, the silent judgments that had filled the space moments before, curdled into a collective, shameful awareness. Price looked as if he'd been physically struck. The blood drained from his face. I didn't know. He didn't say—" "He didn't have to," Henderson said, his tone turning cold. "Your job was to verify information, not profile a customer. You saw federal credentials and assumed theft. You saw a successful black man and saw a threat." Malcolm finally spoke, his voice still calm, a deep contrast to the tension. "Agent, it's handled." "Sir, with respect," Henderson replied, turning back to him. "It's not. You have grounds for a formal complaint. Discrimination. false report. We can take that statement now. Every eye in the bank was fixed on Malcolm. They waited for the explosion, for the righteous demand for justice, for the lawsuit that would surely follow. The air was thick with anticipation and dread. Malcolm looked around the room, at Leah's horrified face, at the customers who had watched him with suspicion, at Gerald Price, a man now shrinking inside his own suit. "No," Malcolm said, the single word echoing softly. "I didn't come here for a report. The deepest stories are often the quietest. Stay with us." The word "no" hung in the air, not as a surrender, but as a declaration of a different kind of power. Malcolm Vance hadn't come for vengeance. He'd come for a wire transfer. The sheer normalcy of his intended purpose made the circus around him feel grotesque. "I'm not here to punish anyone," Malcolm continued, his eyes finally settling on Gerald Price. The manager seemed to be physically wilting under the weight of his own shame. "But understand something. If your first instinct when you see a black man with wealth is to reach for the phone, the flaw isn't in your system, it's in your sight." Price tried to form words, but only a choked sound emerged. I'm sorry." "Your apology," Malcolm said, picking up his attaché case, "isn't for me to accept. It's for you to live with." He turned and walked out of the office, past the two agents who fell into step slightly behind him, a silent, formidable escort. The lobby parted for him. No one dared speak. The earlier tension had inverted. Now it was a crushing pressure of collective guilt. They had all been accomplices in their silence, their glances, their quiet assumptions. Malcolm didn't head for the exit. He walked directly back to the teller window where Leah stood, paralyzed. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and remorse. "Sir, I am so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. Malcolm placed his case on the counter. "Let's complete the transaction, please." Her hands shook as she pulled up the system. She miskied the routing number twice, her fingers clumsy with nerves. Each mistake seemed to amplify the silence. Malcolm waited, his expression neutral, not offering comfort, not offering condemnation. His mere presence was the lesson. Behind him, Agent Henderson stood watch, arms crossed, his gaze sweeping the room, ensuring no further disrespect. The message was clear. This man, regardless of what the bank thought, operated under a different order of respect and protection. Across the floor, whispers finally broke through. "Did you see that salute? They called him Colonel. I thought he was scamming something." Whispers weren't about him anymore. They were about the people saying them. They were realizing they had witnessed a man's dignity being questioned simply because he didn't match a predetermined image of legitimacy. As Leah finally printed the confirmation slip, her hands steadied. She passed it to him, the paper faintly rattling. "It's done, Colonel Vance." He took it, folded it once with deliberate care, and slid it into his inner suit pocket. He gave her a single, slow nod. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Then he turned. His eyes found Gerald Price, who had stumbled out of his office and was leaning against the doorframe, as if his legs could no longer support him. Malcolm walked toward him. The crowd held its breath again. He stopped a few feet away, close enough for his words to be for Price alone, yet his quiet intensity carried. "I served for 18 years, Malcolm began, his voice low but penetrating. "In rooms you'll never see, reviewing threats you'll never know existed. My training was to assess danger based on evidence, on action, never on skin, never on a suit." He took a slow breath, the memory of dust and tension flickering behind his eyes. "You had evidence in your hand, government-issued, verifiable. You chose to see a ghost instead of a man. That phone call you made, in another context with a less connected individual, it doesn't end with a salute. It ends with hands on hoods, with knees in backs, with a life altered." Price was crying now, silent tears streaking down his face. He had no defense. The truth was a naked, ugly thing in the fluorescent light. "I was wrong," Price choked out. "Yes," Malcolm said simply, "you were." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The finality of the statement was more devastating than any curse. Malcolm turned his back on the broken manager for the last time and walked toward the glass doors, the agents flanking him. Just before he reached the exit, a new voice cut through, sharp and clear. "Colonel Vance, please a moment. Stories like this change how we see the world. Don't miss the next one on LostBlack." A woman in a tailored navy blazer was moving quickly across the marble floor, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm of urgency. She was in her late 40s, her face a mask of controlled professional horror. Joanna Reed, the regional director. She had arrived unseen during the climax and had witnessed the fallout. Malcolm stopped, turning with a patient, weary grace. "Joanna Reed," she said, extending a hand he did not take. She let it fall undeterred. "I'm so profoundly sorry for what happened in our branch today. There is no excuse." Malcolm studied her. He saw the genuine distress, but also the calculus of damage control behind her eyes. "Are you sure about that?" he asked. Across the room, a soft, broken sob escaped Gerald Price. He sank into a client chair, burying his face in his hands. Joanna continued, her voice lower. "I also understand. If you wish to close your accounts or pursue legal action, we will cooperate fully, regardless. What happened was a failure of our values." Malcolm's gaze was unwavering. "It was a failure of humanity. Your values just didn't stop it." She flinched, but nodded. "You're right. The truth is, we don't often see clients with your profile. Perhaps that's part of the problem. My staff doesn't recognize excellence when it doesn't look like what they expect." Malcolm shook his head slowly, a sad, knowing gesture. "This isn't about me, Ms. Reed. I'll be fine. I have layers of protection most people can't imagine." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow filled the quiet lobby. "But the next black man who walks through that door, the one in a suit he saved a year to buy, he might not have a federal ID. He might just have a paycheck from a second job. He might just want to cash it to pay his rent." Malcolm's eyes hardened. "And if your people treat him the way I was treated today, he won't walk out calmly. He might not walk out at all. He'll be just another statistic, another misunderstanding that ends in trauma." Joanna Reed had no reply. The hypothetical future he painted was more terrifying than the present scandal. It was the real cost. "We will do better," she vowed, the words feeling inadequate even as she said them. "I hope so," Malcolm said, "for his sake." His eyes swept the room one final time. They passed over the cameras, over the gawking faces, and landed on a young boy, maybe 9 years old, sitting in the waiting area. The boy had seen it all, the suspicion, the salutes, the tears. His small fists were clenched in his lap, his eyes wide with unprocessed understanding. Malcolm gave the boy a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a silent transmission. "You saw. Don't forget." Then he pushed through the glass doors and was gone, swallowed by the ordinary afternoon. The two agents lingered for a moment, casting a final, disapproving look over the frozen scene before following him out. The silence he left behind was dense and uncomfortable. It wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a mirror held up to a crowd that didn't like its reflection. Joanna Reed turned, the warmth draining from her face as she approached Gerald Price. "Gather your personal items," she said, her voice cold and formal. "I'll be speaking with HR within the hour. Security will escort you out." Price didn't protest. He didn't look up. He simply nodded into his hands, his career, his reputation, his self-image dissolving in the span of one disastrous afternoon. The teller window, Leah slumped onto her stool. She stared at her keyboard, replaying the moment she'd seen the IDs, the moment she'd called the supervisor. "I didn't mean to," she mumbled to no one. "I was just following." Denise, the veteran teller beside her, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Honey," she said softly, "what you meant, don't clean up the mess you helped make. Intentions are cheap. Impact is what costs." Leah nodded, fresh tears welling. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" Denise looked out at the now empty street. No, child, and God knows he shouldn't. The bank slowly, awkwardly, tried to return to business, but the air had changed. It was charged with a new awareness, a collective shame that hummed beneath the sounds of printers and shuffling papers. People avoided each other's eyes. They finished their transactions quickly, eager to escape the scene of their own silent complicity. That evening, as the sun bled orange over the city, Malcolm sat on a bench in Mill River Park. He'd changed into jeans and a plain t-shirt. The attaché case was gone. He was just a man, alone with his thoughts and the distant shouts of children playing. He took out the wire transfer confirmation slip, crisp and official. He didn't need it. The money was already gone, moving across digital rivers to its destination. He stared at it, then a faint, tired smile touched his lips. The day wasn't about the money. It wasn't even really about him. It was about the story people are conditioned to see before the person ever speaks. It was about the terrifying speed at which dignity can be stripped on a whim, on a suspicion, on a look. But it was also about a quieter, more resilient truth, that dignity isn't granted by institutions. It isn't bestowed by a uniform or a bank balance. It's an internal fortress built brick by brick in silence, known only to the one who carries it. And no manager, no protocol, no frightened teller could ever breach its walls. As twilight settled, the bank on 4th Street closed its doors. The cleaners moved through, wiping away the fingerprints of the day's tension. But some stains wouldn't come out with bleach. In the staff break room, amid the smell of old coffee and microwave meals, a single sheet of printer paper was taped to the wall. The words were handwritten in clean, block letters. Don't be the reason someone has to prove they belong. Just treat them like they do. No one saw who put it up, no signature, but everyone who read it understood. It was the ghost of the day, the unspoken lesson Malcolm Vance left imprinted on the air. Joanna Reed saw it and didn't take it down. She left it as a silent, searing reminder. Across town, Malcolm finished his water and stood from the park bench. The cicada's song rose in a wave. A father played catch with his son under a streetlight. Life, oblivious and persistent, moved on. Malcolm, the incident was a familiar sting, a variation on a theme he'd lived too many times, just with a different, more dramatic third act. The salute didn't vindicate him, it simply exposed the bias for the farce it was. His peace came from a place no external validation could touch. It came from the deserts, the safe houses, the impossible decisions. It came from knowing who he was when the titles were stripped away. Back at the bank, the human fallout continued in quiet waves. Gerald Price emptied his desk into a cardboard box, under the watchful eye of security. The mementos of a 20-year career, family photos, a top producer plaque, felt like artifacts from someone else's life. He was a cautionary tale now, not a manager. Leah asked to leave early. She drove home in silence, the radio off. Her apartment felt too small. She kept seeing his eyes, not angry, just profoundly disappointed. That was worse. Anger you can argue with. Disappointment just sits there, a judgment you have to live inside. She thought about the next black customer she would serve. Would she flinch? Would she overcorrect with unnatural cheer? The encounter had fractured her professional certainty, leaving behind a minefield of doubt and fear. That was the real punishment. Not a firing, but a lifelong questioning of her own instincts. The story didn't make the news. There was no press conference, no lawsuit filed. It was a contained, private earthquake. But for those who felt its tremors, the ground was forever shifted. For the customers who were there, it became a "where were you when" story, told over dinners in hushed tones. I was at the bank when they saluted that black guy. It was a moral fable for modern times, a reminder that prejudice isn't always a burning cross. Sometimes it's a whispered doubt, a frozen smile, a closed blind. For the young boy in the waiting area, it was simpler and more profound. He asked his mother on the drive home, why were those men scared of that man in the suit? His mother, fumbling for an answer that wouldn't shatter his view of the world, simply said, sometimes people see things that aren't there, baby. The boy was quiet, then said, he was the bravest one there, he didn't even yell. That was it, the core of it all. In a world quick to anger, quick to judge, quick to call for backup, the most powerful response was unwavering calm. It was a dignity that disarmed shame without raising a hand. We all make snap judgments. It's a human failing, a mental shortcut in a complex world. But what separates a moral life from a complacent one isn't the absence of bias. It's the courage to confront it when it rears its head. The question this story leaves you with isn't about Malcolm Vance. It's about you. When you're in that moment, when a whisper of unfounded suspicion passes through a room, when someone is being treated as less than based on a look, an accent, a suit, what will you do? You be the silent bystander, letting assumption become action? Will you be the Gerald Price, so sure of your own fear that you mistake it for protocol? Or will you be the one, even without a title, without a badge, without anyone to salute you, who takes a breath, steps forward, and simply leads with respect? You don't need permission to see a person's humanity. You just have to choose to look. Malcolm Vance walked into a bank to move his money. He walked out having moved something far heavier, the conscience of everyone who watched. And the weight of that lesson, if we choose to carry it, can change more than just a single afternoon. It can change the pattern of a life, the culture of a place, the quiet justice of everyday moments. This was a story about seeing. If it made you see something differently, share it. Talk about it. Silence is easy, growth is not.